Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning, it's at 9:30. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Mark Dolan this morning and Bev Turner.
That's right, great to have your company. And look, massive developments. We've got the legal net migration stats. They are on the way. We're expecting them any minute now. They could be in excess of 700,000 in a year. We'll discuss the political, economic and humanitarian implications.
That's right, and a sad story overnight. 2 migrants attempting to make that perilous journey lost their life. Ray Addison has the latest.
Rishi Sunak has promised to stop the boats. However, the attempts keep being made with 2 fatalities last night. I'll have all the details live from Dover.
Plus, New Year bills. The energy price cap will increase in January. More strain on all of us trying to pay our bills after Christmas. GB News' political correspondent Olivia Utley has the latest.
Just when taxes start to go down, energy prices start to go up. It looks like the cost of living crisis isn't going to end anytime soon.
And a rumble in the jungle. Nigel Farage and TikTok influencer Nella Rose clashed last night on I'm a Celeb. Have a listen.
And why don't black people like you?
You'd be amazed, they do.
You'd
be amazed.
Nigel!
If you came with me, if you came with me through South London, you'd be astonished.
Oh, wow, what were you doing in South London, Nigel?
Well, I'm there every day.
You're in South. Wait, sorry, I'm so sorry to be shouting. What are you doing? Sorry.
He's from South London.
I travel through South London.
So everyone hates you for no reason.
What are we doing in South London, Nigel? If that's not discriminatory. I don't know what is.
Yeah, he's not allowed in South London. No-go zone for poor old Nigel Farage.
Anyway, we don't mind having these difficult conversations. As we said, we're waiting for the migration figures this morning. They should be dropping any minute now. Legal migration into this country. How many people do you think should be coming here? Should they have specific jobs that you would like to see filled by people from overseas? Maybe we have no choice. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. That and a lot more this morning. But first of all, here's your very latest news with Tamsin.
Bev, thanks very much and good morning from the GB Newsroom. It's 9:32. The timing of the next general election had no impact on the decision to cut taxes, according to the Chancellor. Jeremy Hunt used the autumn statement yesterday to announce cuts to national insurance worth £10 billion. He said the economy has defied the odds and that a recession had been avoided.
But the measures that I've taken today are what, more than 200 businesses wrote to me to ask for. The big business organisations like the CBI said it was the single most transformative thing that I could do. They're not particularly crowd pleasers. They're not the tax cuts that are on the tip of everyone's tongues, like an income tax cut or inheritance tax, but they are the things that will make the biggest difference to our long-term competitiveness.
Well, despite those tax cuts, energy bills are expected to rise after the energy regulator announced a 5% increase to the price cap. From January, the average household will pay around £94 more over the course of a year. Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron is visiting Israel amid uncertainty about when a truce in the war with Hamas will begin. A senior Israeli official said a 4-day pause in fighting won't take effect before Friday, a day later than originally expected. A little bit of breaking news for you now. Estimated net migration to the UK stood at just over 607,000 in the year to June 2023, up from 607,000 in the previous 12 months, but below a revised record. That's according to the Office for National Statistics. And of course, we'll have more analysis on that with Bev and Mark in just a moment. And that's all from me for now. Those are the headlines. Of course, you can get more on all of those stories. Just visit our website, gbnews.com. Back now to Bev and Mark.
Very good morning. It is 9:34. This is Britain's Newsroom this morning with me, Bev Turner, and Mark Dolan. We're going to be deconstructing those immigration figures which have just landed.
670,000 in a year.
But first of all, before that, a sad story overnight. 2 migrants have died attempting to cross the channel in a small boat yesterday, while 60 asylum seekers were crammed onto this boat.
57 others were rescued by boat and taken back to France, and another was airlifted to safety.
Let's go now to Ray Addison, who is in Dover. Ray, what more details do we know, and what's the very latest down there?
Yeah, good morning to you both. Well, the latest is that we know that a new attempt is currently being made. There's one small boat around about 1 kilometre from the French coast in the water, and that looks like it's struggling with the choppy conditions, and is actually looks like it's going to be heading back to the French coastline. What we understand about this fatality incident yesterday is that around about midday yesterday, several small boats attempted to make their way from the French coastline to the UK across the Channel. However, the majority were stopped by French border patrol officers. One, however, did manage to make it into the water. A number of sightings were shortly after made and reported to French authorities of people being in the water from that vessel and struggling. It's understood there was around 60 people crammed into one small boat. French authorities obviously responded very quickly. I believe they were assisted as well by UK maritime services too. However, there were 2 fatalities, a man and a woman who were both in their 30s. Another person was taken to hospital. It's not yet understood what condition they might be in. Now, of course, that is just the latest series of fatalities that we've seen in this very, very dangerous crossing, where there's been very dangerous conditions over the last week. The last large number of crossings was made on the 16th of November, when we had about 350 people come across. There was more attempts, though, yesterday when we saw the RNLI bring in a number of migrants to Dungeness port as well, and several people had to be, one person had to be stretchered off, and ambulances responded as well, with several people suffering from the effects of being in the water in that situation as well. Now, of course, we know that these statistics are coming out today. They were released at 9:30 this morning, and what they're telling us is that in the year ending September of 2023, there were just over 45,000 detected irregular arrivals to the United Kingdom. Now, that not all of those are small boats, small boat arrivals. However, 83% were, although we're being told as well that between July and September of 2023, detected irregular arrivals were 33% down than in the same period the year before. However, this of course will be no comfort.
OK, thank you, Ray. Ray Addison there. Now, if you're just tuning in, we've got the latest net migration figures. They are 672,000 in the year to June 2023, up from 607,000 in the previous 12 months, but below a revised record figure of 745,000 in the year to December 2022. This is according to the Office of National Statistics.
Just let that figure sink in. 670,000 people in a year. That is a British city in 12 months. So it always gets us thinking, what would the ideal number be for net migration? What do you think?
I think it's really difficult to put a specific number on it, but I wouldn't want it to be much more than about 100,000, I think, net migration. I don't know why that just feels instinctively right. But when do we see it? We see it when we go to the GP. We see it when we take a kid to A&E and the queue is out of the door. That's when I always am struck by
we have traffic on the roads.
Awful traffic on the roads. It feels like there are so many people. We can't get enough rooms to rent, particularly in London. There are so many people that it means the prices of the rooms and renting has gone up enormously, hasn't it?
Most definitely. There's also an assumption that all the people coming are brain surgeons and nurses and rocket scientists. That's not the case. These numbers will impact the welfare bill for this country as well. Now, a certain level of legal net migration is probably beneficial for the economy. I mean, there's a direct link between economic growth and levels of migration. But I think that both Labour and the Tories over several decades now have rather sort of manipulated those figures in order to boost growth, but it's a short-term gain, because in the end, our infrastructure is creaking. And as we saw in yesterday's Autumn statement, the country's broke. We live beyond our means. How adding 700,000 people in a year or just under is going to help the economy is anyone's guess.
I don't know, Mark. And I think, you know what I'm seeing? I'm having some building work on my house at the moment. And it's very, very, very...
Conservatory?
No. It's very, very... It's not been done since I got divorced. It needed doing. Okay. It's very, very difficult to get labourers, builders, brickies, decorators. Now, you might say, well, that's a bad thing. But what has the implications have been? It is if you want your house doing. The implications is actually the wages for those people have gone up, which was one of the motivations behind Brexit, so that we wouldn't have lots of cheap labour here undercutting British-born plumbers, builders, carpenters, whatever, who want to do the work.
Yeah.
But it feels now, in looking at these numbers, well, who are these people? Who are the 700,000? Are they fulfilling the right skills that we need for people in this country?
Well, even if they are skilled, and plenty will be, the issue is, can the country cope? Our infrastructure, as I say, is absolutely creaking. The other issue you've got is over 5 million people in this country of working age who are not active in the economy. 1 million job vacancies out there. They should be filled by the Brits that we already have here. And we've got a culture of importing people to do the work that our own citizens won't do. Jeremy Hunt talked yesterday about how it's got to pay to work. Well, in this country, it still pays not to work.
It does. We're going to be digging into these numbers. As we say, this is hot off the press. These figures broke about 10 minutes ago now of this number. It's always interesting to see on a day like this how the government will spin these figures. What will the detail be that they can make something of to make some sort of political capital?
And we've spoken a lot about the economy, but what about our society, our culture? The principle of that many people coming in a year is bound to be unbalancing, bound to be disruptive for the equilibrium of our communities. That makes sense. Of course it does. And why does it make you a bad person to debate that? I mean, do you know what I think we need? I think we need a referendum. I know we've got a bit of a sort of bumpy history with referendums, but I think we need a referendum on levels of legal net migration.
I just can't imagine they would ever engage in such a democratic process at the moment. Mark Weiss is here. Luckily, Mark, good to see you. Now, you've had these figures as well for about 9.5 minutes, I think, thereabouts. What do we know about the detail?
Right. So net migration, obviously, is the figure that everybody has been waiting for. We know that's 672,000, up from 606,000 in the last comparable figures. Less than what the ONS was estimating it would be, but still, it's a record figure. Boiling that down, it means that 1.2 million people came into the UK, 508,000 left. Now, when we look at the figures for who is coming in, what they might be doing. Work visas, 322,000 work visas were issued, but these also include dependents. We need to just boil it down a bit more to find out how many dependents. We've not found out yet, but I can tell you with student visas, they're at 378,000 student visas. Now, that's up from 320,000 student visas in the last set of figures. And there we do have the number for dependents. So of those 378,000, there were 96,000 dependents. So a very significant chunk of people just attached to those students that have come in. 58,000 was the previous figure, so that's gone up to 96,000. The government is trying to ensure that that particular loophole is tightened up and that there is a set limit on the number of dependents that students can bring with them. Humanitarian routes, well, remember the last time we spoke an awful lot about what was happening with those coming across from Ukraine and Hong Kong and Afghanistan. Well, that this time has gone down. It was 157,000. The last set of figures, it's now gone down to 83,000. Still quite a number, many of them coming from the likes of Ukraine.
And probably that's the least contentious stat, wouldn't you say, Sarah Vine? 83,000 people genuinely fleeing war, fleeing for their lives. That's the point about our country. We're very tolerant and welcoming to people who face possible death or bad treatment. But what about those other figures? You know, skilled workers and students make up the bulk of it. Do we need those people?
Well, I mean, the thing is, I don't think anyone objects to people coming who, you know, from places like Ukraine and genuinely need our help. That's completely fine. Most people are okay with that. I don't. The figures on the student dependence is quite the student visa dependence is quite interesting because, you know, why do they need those? Why do they need to bring their dependents? It's not. I mean, my son's at university. I don't go and live with him in Cardiff.
Although I'm sure he'd love it.
I mean, he would love it because he'd get his washing done.
Well, that's it.
But
You can keep an eye on him. But
it's not necessarily a sort of. I mean, I think the thing that most people will think is that most people don't mind migration. It's just if they actually contribute and if they're paying taxes and if they're contributing to the economy. But, of course, the problem is a lot of these people are not. They're going to be actually placing a burden on us. I mean, it's nice that so many people want to come to the UK. It's a good sign for us. I mean, it means that we are still, you know, very much a destination country for a lot of people. I think that maybe the student visa thing has something to do with the fact that universities are touting their courses so enthusiastically with foreign students because they get so much more money.
So that could be a mature student coming over here and therefore bringing their wife and children.
Yes, exactly.
Which makes you wonder whether they're genuinely here because they want to study or because it's an excuse
to... Well, they're probably doing PhDs or whatever, but that's fine. And if they are doing PhDs, they're probably going to be quite useful people to have around. But the other issue is, why have we got all these, you know, Brits sitting around at home doing nothing, and why are we importing people to do the work that they should be doing? That's the big issue, I think.
What else do we know, Mark?
It's a worry.
So we can talk about asylum. Now, these are slightly different to the breakdown that we'll get from the Home Office. Just to complicate it, as if the Office for National Statistics is not impenetrable enough, we also get figures coming out from the Home Office that give a breakdown on the asylum system. system.
Did the Home Office and the ONS release these statistics on the same day?
They do, yes.
And they are complementary but can be contradictory.
You put it very well. Yeah, they are very confusing when you're initially just trying to inwardly digest them. But in terms of asylum, 90,000, according to the ONS, came into the country on asylum visas, so came in as part of an asylum claim.
And remind me what period of time we're talking about again, Mark?
We're talking the year to June this year.
Right, June
23. Now, that compares to 75,000 previously, so that's gone up as well. Now, what we'll get from the Home Office in terms of their figures is always quite interesting as well. We know, in terms of those coming across illegally in small boats, for instance, that it's pushing 28,000 now. What we don't know, and what we should get an idea of, is kind of breakdown of what countries are representative in those small boats. So, for instance, Albania was down in the last set of figures about 90%. And the government says that is due in no small part to the agreement that they've got with Albania to quickly return people to that country. But we'll see. I've been told actually from sources on the other side of the channel that all that's happening with the Albanians is they're not coming on the small boats anymore. They're coming, they're being smuggled in lorries from Poland and the like. So
Albania's not a war zone, though.
It's not a war zone, no.
Here?
And lots of people go there on holiday and have a lovely time.
Yeah, exactly.
Sarah, your experience of being close to government for many years, do you feel that there is a will? Or is it just that it doesn't go down very well with the dinner party set, this kind of chat, does it?
It's a very difficult thing to frame well for governments because Tony Blair had a sort of open door policy, largely because he thought if he let lots of people in, they'd all vote Labour, and then that would mean that he'd never get voted out of power. I mean, being honest, that was what that policy basically was. And so subsequently, anyone who tries to sort of talk about migration, people like Nigel Farage, who, you were saying earlier on, is on I'm a Celebrity and has been shouted at for trying to have a conversation about migration. It just gets framed as, oh, you're just a racist, you're just not a very nice person, you hate foreigners. And that's not true. The thing is that, a lot of people voted for Brexit because they wanted to be able to control levels of migration. And it's not as though, we're not saying, no, you can't all come here. Just we have to have a quota, and that quota has to be respected because otherwise the infrastructure of the country cannot really cope. And I think we see that every day in our public services. And Labour will say, oh well, the problem is that the Tories haven't invested enough in the NHS and stuff. They've thrown billions at it. Yeah. It's just that the client base, for want of a better word, of the NHS is so huge now because there are so many people. It's, if you're trying to deliver a service that's free at point of delivery and you've got so many people using it.
This idea that it's so interesting, I find it so interesting that politicians can't say they are in favour of low migration, even though they know it would be a vote winner. It regularly comes out, the top three things that British people feel most strongly about. Brexit, to some extent, was the closest we will get to a referendum on the number of people we want to be able to freely come and live here. And the British public voted that we would like less migration. So I'm still not quite sure about why it's politically difficult to manage that.
Because it's just not very PC. It's, we're supposed to, you're supposed to say that everybody should be able to come here because, that's what we are. I mean, and the other problem is, and I think this is a really interesting argument, is that it's very difficult when people say, why are so many people coming to the country? Well, a lot of Brits don't want to do the jobs that those people are doing. Let's be honest about that. Yeah. They're coming here because they're prepared to do the things that British people don't want to do because they'd rather stay at home and take their benefits. So I think, Ian Duncan Smith is very interesting on this because he's been arguing for years and years and years that we need really proper, serious welfare reform. Yeah. Because the problem with Britain is that it is, even now that we're outside of the EU, so we don't have to offer people the same benefits as the rest of the EU, which is what we had to do when we were in the EU. Even now that we're out, we are still an absolute peach of a country to come to because you will get looked after. You won't, you will get benefits. You will get money given to you and thrown. And it's just the way it is.
Yes, and we're a very tolerant, welcoming nation as well, so it's an attractive place to come.
You go to somewhere like, I grew up in Italy and France and Spain, and, people say, oh, Britain is a racist country. trust me, try going somewhere like Italy. You know, people are horrible to foreigners.
Eastern European countries as well are very unwelcoming.
We're very, generally speaking, you know, compared to the rest of Europe, we're actually very not racist, very welcoming. But the thing is that there's a limit, because everybody has their limit, and you can't completely exceed that all of the time without people getting fed up.
I just wonder, Sarah and Mark, whether Rishi Sunak and the government are hiding behind the small boats crisis, which in my view is a humanitarian, economic and national security disaster. But, you know, the numbers drop in the ocean compared to these figures, and I just wonder whether that is the elephant in the room. And also the societal impact. OK, so Britain is a great melting pot. It's a diverse society. I think the most integrated society in the world, if you ask me. But it's not healthy, is it, for a country and a culture to have that level of net migration annually?
Well, it depends. If the people coming want to live in Britain and they come here because they like our country and they like our liberal democracy and they want to be part of it, fantastic. But if you're coming here because you somehow want to try and undermine that country and those values, then no. So again, there has to be there has to be a line.
And that's where it becomes a political hot potato.
Exactly,
Which is what kind of impositions do you make?
You're right about the small boats. It's a dog whistle issue. People, it's very visceral. People see these awful tragedies happening, but it's not the small boat. You know, in terms of net migration, in terms of figures, the small boats, as you say, aren't really the big problem.
When might we expect, Mark, to have a statement from the government maybe about this?
Oh, any time. I'm sure that there will be a statement. I think, just to go back to your point on the small boats, the difficulty about the small boats is it is a highly visible manifestation of the government's failure to get a control on its borders. But you're right, in terms of the actual migration figures, those coming legally into the country, you know, they dwarf those figures on the small boats. I should say, we're told as well from the Home Office that 75,000 asylum applications. That differs from the ONS figures of those who came here having achieved asylum, that came and migrated to this country. 75,000, which is 10% lower than the previous year, they claim. In the year ending September, those a bit more figure, there were 5,500 enforced returns, which was an increase of 54%, but only 5,500 returns when you're talking about tens of thousands of people coming illegally each year into the country.
Super. Right, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Sarah.
OK, still to come. True financial ease or a tax cut tease? GB News' economics editor Liam Halligan will be with us to break down how impactful the autumn statement really was.
That's right. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of rain around across the north today. It's also pretty blustery. Most places dry further south, but we're all going to be turning colder by tomorrow. Here's the area of rain I was talking about. It's been quite a wet night over the Highlands. That rain now spreading south through the central belt and into southern Scotland, then Northern Ireland, the far north of England. Most of England and Wales, though, will be dry. Some rain and drizzle over the hills, perhaps, and across much of central and northern Scotland. There'll be a mixture of sunny spells, but plenty of blustery showers. Things turning colder here, single digits, but with some brightness further south, we could get into the teens once more. But we won't be seeing the teens during tomorrow, because as this band of rain sinks south through this evening, bringing some light rain for a time over the Midlands and Wales, it will be introducing that colder air from the north. There'll be plenty more showers coming in across northeast Scotland. Very windy conditions here too through today and tonight, and some of the showers coming in could be wintry, even to lower levels, potentially turning things quite icy in some spots. So a colder day on Friday, but for many it'll be a dry and a bright day with some sunshine. The wintry showers keep going in the northeast. As I said, even some sleet and snow to low levels, but certainly some over the hills. Elsewhere, a few rain showers for Wales, perhaps southwest England, but many places dry and bright tomorrow. But you will notice that chill. Temperatures struggling, single figures for most, and feeling a lot colder in the east with the wind.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with Newsroom.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my new show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m, where real people get to meet those in power and hold them to account. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country in the real world. Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It is 10 a.m. It's Thursday, the 23rd of November. This is Britain's Newsroom with me, Mark Dolan, in for Andrew Pearce with Bev Turner.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. So net migration in the UK stood at £672,000 in the year. £70?
Is that your salary, Bev? It's out the bag.
We were talking...
Drinks are on you.
We were talking about finance so much yesterday with the autumn statement.
Obsessed with money, this woman.
In the year to June 2023, up from 607,000 in the previous 12 months. We'll have the latest.
Meanwhile, a vote-winning statement. Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, announced the biggest tax cut since the 80s. Are the Tories setting out their stall for a general election? The Chancellor spoke to Eamon and Isabel on breakfast today.
No idea when the next election will be. But when it comes to elections, people do vote Conservative because they think that we are going to take the right decisions for the long term of the economy. They fundamentally trust us on the economy.
And New Year bills. See, it's all about money. It's been announced this morning that the energy price cap will increase in January. More strain on all of us trying to pay our bills.
Absolutely, just what we need after Christmas. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage and TikTok influencer Nella Rose clashed on I'm a Celebrity last night. Take a listen.
Then why don't black people like you?
You'd be amazed they do. You'd be amazed.
Nigel!
If you came with me, if you
Nigel!
came with me, if you came with me through South London, you'd be astonished.
Oh, wow, what were you doing in South London, Nigel?
Well, I'm there every day.
You're in South. Wait, sorry, I'm so sorry to be shy. What are you doing? Sorry. He's from South London.
I travel through South London.
So everyone hates you for no reason.
Blimey, Nigel's earning his corn there, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. He's having an interesting time in the jungle. You can see his patience was wearing a little thin last night. We're going to be discussing that with Sam Lister and Carol Malone, who are in the studio with us this morning. Let us know your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.com. First, though, your very latest news with Tamsin Roberts.
Thank you and good morning from the GB Newsroom. It's 2 minutes past 10. Net migration to the UK was up in 2022. However, new figures show a downward trend to June this year. A record was hit in December with 745,000 arrivals. That's estimated to drop to just over 670,000 in the year to June. The Office for National Statistics says it's too early to tell if it's the start of a trend, but most estimates suggest immigration is slowing while the number of people leaving the UK is going up. The timing of the next election had no impact on the decision to cut taxes, according to the Chancellor. Jeremy Hunt used the autumn statement yesterday to announce cuts to national insurance worth £10 billion. He said the economy has defied the odds and that a recession had been avoided.
But the measures that I've taken today are what, more than 200 businesses wrote to me to ask for. The big business organisations like the CBI said it was the single most transformative thing that I could do. They're not particularly crowd pleasers. They're not the tax cuts that are on the tip of everyone's tongues, like an income tax cut or inheritance tax. But they are the things that will make the biggest difference to our long-term competitiveness.
Well, Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury, James Murray, says the public feels neglected.
You've had 13 years of low growth, you've had high taxes, you've had public services crumbling, and I think people know how they feel in this country at the moment under the cost of living crisis. If you ask families, do you and your family feel better off now than you were 13 years ago? I think right across Britain, the overwhelming answer will be no. And all of that is borne out by the statistics and the figures which were issued yesterday alongside the autumn statement, and the prospects for growth and change in the future are not there either.
Despite those tax cuts, energy bills are expected to rise after the energy regulator announced a 5% increase to the price cap. From January, the average household will pay around £94 more over the course of a year. Ofgem says the increase is driven almost entirely by market instability and global events, including the war in Ukraine. Liberal Democrat spokesperson for the Treasury, Sarah Olney, said the Tories aren't doing enough.
And they're seeing, and again this morning we're hearing that the energy price cap is going up, so people can look forward, if I can put it like that, to higher energy bills again this winter. And what they see from the Tories is basically they're just completely out of touch. It feels like Rishi Sunak, Jeremy Hunt, they don't really understand what it's like on the ground for ordinary everyday people.
The Foreign Secretary is visiting Israel amid uncertainty about when a pause in the war with Hamas will begin. The agreement for a 4-day ceasefire in Gaza appears to have been delayed. A senior Israeli official said it would not take effect before Friday, a day later than originally expected. Under the planned agreement, Hamas will release 50 Israeli hostages in exchange for 150 Palestinian prisoners. A Eurosceptic politician whose anti-Islam comments have led to death threats could be on track to become the next Prime Minister of the Netherlands. Geert Wilders is leading talks to form a coalition government after his Freedom Party scored a stunning upset last night. He promised to be a Prime Minister for everyone, but the result will send shockwaves across Europe. The right-wing populist has stoked tensions and generated headlines with promises to freeze immigration, slash payments to the EU and veto all new members to the bloc, including Ukraine. But despite his Euroscepticism, he'll have to work with pro-EU parties if he's to form government.
Politics for 25 years now, and this is the happiest day of my life so far in politics. We became the #1 party by far. I mean, it's what a lot of people, if you would have asked them a year ago, would call you mad, and it happened today. So I'm very proud, I'm very happy, and it brings along a lot of feeling of responsibility.
The time has come for the Time Lord to celebrate as Doctor Who marks its 60th anniversary. The very first episode of the long-running series was broadcast on this day back in 1963. The special day will be marked by the return of David Tennant, whose turn as the Doctor remains a fan favourite. And if you're in Cardiff, you can celebrate by taking a journey through time and space with a special water-based projection. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker. Just say play GB News. Now it's back to Bev and Mark.
Good morning, it's 10:07. It's me with Mark Dolan this morning. They've let him out of prime time to scum it with us.
Yes, I'm not used to these early starts. Caught in the traffic, but it's great to be with you.
OK, so you've been getting in touch at home, gbviews@gbnews.com. Mark has said it's 600,000, the ones we know about. What about the ones we don't know about? Marilyn has said, when will our government wake up and do something about the boats? It can't be that difficult to get the Navy to take them back to where they came from. I'm sick of this. I think it's important to clarify these figures as well this morning. That this is net migration to June 2023, main figure of 670,000. That is separate, of course, to people who've come across on small boats, which is 28,000 so far this year, which is nothing compared to the legal migration.
This is exactly it. You know, no one likes to see the spectacle of those illegal boat crossings. It's a humanitarian, economic and national security disaster, but it's the tip of the iceberg compared to legal net migration. Leslie says, good morning. The ideal number of immigrants for me is 0. The UK is full, broke and finished. Hard to disagree with what Leslie says there, given the fact that yesterday's autumn statement demonstrates that this country lives beyond its means.
And yet we have this massive labour shortage, and how we reconcile the two is what is particularly difficult, isn't it? We're seeing reactions this morning. These figures only broke about 40 minutes ago. So we're seeing reactions from politicians, various newspaper commentators online this morning. The New Conservatives group, so they're on the Tory right, they're saying that ministers need to close temporary visa schemes for care home workers and cap the number of refugees resettling in the UK at 20,000 in order to slash this net migration figure to 226,000 by the time of the election next year. But we need care home workers.
Well, the thing is, if we need 670,000 people a year, which has a huge impact on our infrastructure, then this country is not fit for purpose, especially with over 5 million people of working age not active in the economy. Why?
Yeah, absolutely. There's huge questions. Get in touch this morning. Let us know your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.com. Now, to talk us through these net migration statistics, we're joined by human rights lawyer David Hay. Good morning, David. Always great to see you. Did these figures come as a surprise for you? Did you expect them to be perhaps a little less?
Hi, good morning to you both. I think, well, first of all, to answer your question, I think that, I'm surprised they're not larger. I think, you said some very important things earlier, particularly trying to, that we need to differentiate these between the figures of so-called legal migration and illegal migration, which is people, for instance, coming across the channel. And I'm seeing that the government really isn't kind of making its best efforts to show those. But I'm surprised they're not larger, given the current chaos that we are in terms of both legal and illegal migration.
Indeed. I mean, the issue we've got, David, is that neither figure is palatable to many of our viewers and listeners, the illegal boat crossings, but also the official net migration number. This is beyond the pale for many people who don't understand how we can accommodate 670,000 people in a year.
Well, absolutely, and I think one of the important things, and I think one of the things actually that will come back to haunt the government is if you look at what Cameron said, I think Lord Cameron now back in 2010, he said that the figures would come down to tens of thousands, and look where we are now. Now, of course, as you said earlier on, Mark, some legal migration is required. I mean, I'm down in Cornwall at the moment, and over the summer, since Brexit, there are not enough workers or people that do not want to do things like in agriculture, picking fruit, picking vegetables, tourism, and that's really harming business. There's lots of jobs. So there are jobs that need filling, whether obviously that's going to be the British people or foreign workers. But it's not, the current situation that I'm looking at is it's not benefiting Britain. The borders are not protected either in terms of legal or illegal migration. And we're also not helping the genuine asylum seekers, those that genuinely need our help, because they're all being vilinised by what's happening with weaponising this.
I'm interested, David, to know your perspective on this with your experience of working with people who want to live in a different country. When we voted for Brexit, a lot of people thought that would mean our immigration numbers would go down. At that time, was it 2016, 2017?
Yeah,
did you expect they would come down in your professional capacity, or did you inevitably think this is not going to make any difference? All we're going to see is people coming from other countries rather than Europe?
The latter. I mean, I spent 10 years of my professional life living in a foreign country, living in the Middle East, countries that are run very much on expat labour. So I knew very much that there would be a change from European labour filling some of the positions to other countries. That's what I was expecting. And that's effectively almost what we're seeing. The country does need foreign labour. We can go into forever talking about why Brits won't fill certain lower paid jobs. But I didn't expect it to be so high. I did expect it to come down perhaps a little bit, obviously, before. But now the way that the current government is mismanaging both the whole of immigration, whether it's legal or illegal, I'm not expecting it to come down. I'm expecting it to go up and up. And on top of that, what we're seeing, particularly in these figures, and I've mentioned it before, if you look at how they've changed the way some of these figures are calculated, on top of this, they're actually cooking the books. So are these figures actually what they say they are? You can get figures to say anything. And if people really look into how they've changed, particularly when you look at student visas, there has been some cooking of the books.
It's all your fault, isn't it, David? See, this is... you might... Sorry, Mark, if I just preempted you, but I can't let him go without asking this question. Sarah Vine was saying the problem with talking about immigration, and she was married to Michael Gove, she was walking the corridors of power, she was sat around the tables with the likes of Boris Johnson for years. This issue is so inflammatory because as soon as you start talking about wanting less people to come here, you're accused of being immoral. It is a moral and political judgment. It's moral, actually, more than political. And that's the fault of people like you, isn't it? Human rights lawyers who make this emotional.
Well, I think, you're correct on one of the things. I mean, certainly anyone talking, if you talk about, I'm British, and if you talk about wanting to reduce the amount of people in terms of migration coming into the country, you're called racist, even if you're not. I mean, so that's the first thing. I mean, in terms of blaming lawyers, as lawyers only basically work with the existing law. So it's the fault of the people that put the law there in the first place and the judges. So it's the politicians first and the judges. The reason why we're in the problem, for instance, at the moment with illegal migration is because of the Human Rights Act, the European Court of Human Rights. I'm not saying come out of it, but those are things that were brought into our law by politicians, and our judges interpreted them. So we can't blame the lawyers. Lawyers are effectively doing their job. It's the people that make the law and interpret it that need to do their job.
Well, we think you're one of the good guys anyway, David Hay. So thank you so much for joining us.
Indeed, and we're delighted now to be joined in the studio by Daily Telegraph sketch writer and columnist Madeline Grant. Madeline, it's a real challenge for our viewers and listeners because that figure of 670,000 will shock many, but there doesn't seem to be political will to tackle that number on either side of the House.
Yes, I completely agree. I think we're seeing glimmers of a recognition in number 10 now that this is a problem. I think some of what they've been trying to do about tightening up the rules around welfare and trying to get more people back to work, I think that's a slight omission that for too long we've been relying on migrant workers to do all these jobs rather than looking at obstacles that exist in our own labour market and helping people back to work. So I think they sort of get it, but it seems very much like too little, too late. And of course, Boris Johnson, who, whilst being the figurehead for Brexit, I don't think that he listened very carefully to the reasons why so many people voted Brexit, because he presided over an incredibly liberal points-based system which set the kind of the criteria very low to include almost anyone who would want to come here, which explains why the numbers have gone up so dramatically. And, you know, there was this myth that people feel that they're more in control, then they don't mind these high numbers too much. I think that's been absolutely shot to pieces over the last few months especially, and we only have to look at what's just happened in the Netherlands, where they have voted in a politician of the hard right. I'm sure not everyone who voted for Geert Wilders loves everything that he stands for, but this is a cry of desperation, basically, saying you can't ignore these concerns anymore.
And those concerns are what? Those concerns are that too much immigration has significantly and tangibly changed the landscape, the cultural landscape of the Netherlands. That's what they're trying to make the point about, isn't it?
Yes, I think that's definitely part of it. And if you have very high numbers of migration all happening at the same time, it's impossible to integrate people properly. You end up with parallel communities existing in a society and no sense of kind of common cause and social cohesion. But also, I think just the myth that we were fed by Liberals for a very long time that actually migration is great for the economy. I mean, if migration were so good for the economy as it's claimed, would we be sitting on the kind of anemic growth figures that we have right now? And especially if you take even the, 0.5, 0.6% growth that we're forecast, if you break that down to a per capita level, i.e. not simply the product of having higher levels of immigration, it starts to look pretty negligible, really.
Well, indeed, I think you get a short-term bump in economic activity because obviously people arrive in the country and they start spending and they pay a bit of tax, perhaps if they're working. But long-term, the welfare bill grows. We've talked about school places. We've talked about traffic on the roads. Talked about the creaking NHS, and more people will need care. Well, at the moment, almost 8 million people are on a waiting list. So how an extra 670,000 helps the waiting list, is beyond me. But there's another factor, housing. Where are people going to live? And what's this going to do to rent?
This is such an important point. I'm often amazed by how few people who are my contemporaries in their kind of late 20s, early 30s, who are struggling to build a house, how they don't see that the kind of incredibly high levels of immigration that a liberal migration policy entails, how that doesn't directly affect their chances of getting on the housing ladder and also finding even a place to rent, because the private rental market is, if anything, more impacted by high migration even than the home ownership, which is a kind of sometimes a separate thing altogether, because many people are not in a position to buy a house immediately, so they are competing for the same private.
But let me push you on that a little, because I think that is so interesting. What is in the minds, therefore, of your contemporaries who say, well, it's OK, it's all right, we like immigration? Why aren't they connecting the two? I think it's because they don't believe that they have a right as a British person. There's something about our identity and our sense of belonging, and we talk about the fact that people feel the state owe them a living. They do, but you have to put alongside that you also have a right to be able to access a house if you can afford it, and you work hard and you put the time in. Is that what psychologically is going on a little bit?
Well, a lot of people feel that because often that's what we saw our parents have. Even whether wealthy or less so, home ownership is a big part of life in Britain, and for that to be taken away from the next generation is quite painful, because it means accepting that you'll probably have less than what your parents did. But I do think that the disconnect is partly explained that people are very angry with the government at the moment, so they tend to blame the government exclusively for whatever's gone wrong.
Briefly, Madeline, you report on our politicians every day in the Telegraph. You write brilliantly on that subject. I don't think we're getting honesty from Keir Starmer, from Ed Davey or Rishi Sunak. We've had some honesty from Emmanuel Macron, of all people, who just a few weeks ago on live television said that France and other Western countries cannot accept the misery of the world. Strong language. If it wasn't Macron, he would have been described as a hard right populist. But we need honesty from our politicians of that ilk.
We do. And I'm glad that he used those kind of strong words. It's the kind of thing that you imagine a Frenchman could pull off slightly better than an Englishman. But I think he makes a very good point that the way the UN refugee code is currently established, there is absolutely no way that the West, Europe, can possibly host all of the people who, according to the Refugee Convention, now have a right to be here based on war and turmoil around the world. The world is a very complicated place, and with better technology and globalisation, more people than ever can actually look at that as a prospect in a way that they would never have done in previous generations. So I think, we need to go back to the drawing board and rethink some of this stuff, because, the world is a very different place.
Yeah, never thought I'd be nice about Emmanuel Macron, but
no.
There you go.
But you're
Miracles
right.
happen.
It's sort of film noir when he says it. We can't accept the misery of the world.
Yeah,
whereas
that's right.
you would never hear such a powerful statement come out of the voice of Rishi
The
Sunak.
French are much more authoritarian than than many people believe.
This
you know,
is
they're
true.
often held up by like Remainers as this kind of like Valhalla
Liberté,
of
yeah.
It's nonsense.
OK, brilliant. Right, stay with us, Madeleine. Still to come, Nella Rose's Thorns. Well, they were out again in the jungle this time. Nigel was her target. Did you see it?
Yeah, explosive stuff.
Oh, you don't want to miss this. It's Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with Newsroom.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Acquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's 25 past 10 in the morning. You're watching Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Mark Dolan, in for Andrew Pearce alongside Bev Turner.
So the state pension is going up, business taxes are coming down, benefits will be boosted and national insurance slashed to 10%. Slashed is probably slightly over-egging the pudding, isn't it? These are just some of the measures announced by the Chancellor.
But he's under pressure to go further on tax cuts. He spoke to Eamon and Ellie on breakfast this morning.
We've always been very honest that has meant we've had to raise taxes in order to pay for those schemes. But now we are able to start bringing them down. And yes, there is a short-term impact on growth when you're tackling inflation, because that means that interest rates are higher, and that is reflected in the forecasts. But the measures that I've taken today are what, more than 200 businesses wrote to me to ask for.
Still with us, the Daily Telegraph columnist Madeline Grant and our economics and business editor Liam Halligan. Liam, further reflections on yesterday's autumn statement. Deck chairs being rearranged on the Titanic?
Well, it wasn't really a tax-cutting autumn statement at all. There were headline-grabbing tax-cutting measures. But, of course, Rachel Reeves was spot on. You have to hand it to her. Those tax cuts were more than offset by the massive increase in taxation represented by the freezing of those tax thresholds. Rishi Sunak started that when he was Chancellor back in 2022. They're going to be frozen all the way to 2028, drawing more and more people into paying tax. 4 million more people will be paying income tax in 2028 than in 2023 because these thresholds have been frozen. That starting rate of tax, 12.5 grand. And 3 million more people will be paying the higher rate of tax that are currently paying the basic rate of income tax, including middle-ranking teachers, nurses, police. As I said on Dubes' show last night, just be honest.
Yeah.
If you want to raise the basic rate of income tax by 6p over 5 years, which is what these tax rises amount to, these freezing of thresholds, then do it. And you and I, Bev and Mark and Mads and Uncle Tom Cobley and all, we can have a chat about it and see if that's the way we want to run our economy.
Yeah.
Don't pretend that you're tax cutting when you're actually tax raising, because the punters know and they resent you for treating them as if they're stupid.
You're so right. And in fact, we had Adam Brooks, pub landlord, on yesterday, who was just infuriated by the idea that we're freezing duty on alcohol was somehow a gift. It's like saying, I could punch you in the face, but I won't punch you in the face, and therefore aren't I marvellous that I'm not going to punch you in the face? I mean, Adam is a boxer now, so I can use that analogy quite safely.
Literally.
But, the sort of stupidity that they seem to impose upon the public that we won't see through this is astounding, Liam.
It's the black arts of political spin. Look, if we did have a sort of 6p rise in the basic rate of income tax, the likes of us on this panel, we'd talk about little else. Would be, I'm not saying there'd be civic unrest, but there would be a massive philosophical discussion. Are we Sweden? Are we Finland? Or are we America, right? But when you boil the frog slowly, the frog doesn't know that it's being boiled. And freezing tax thresholds, fiscal drag, it is the ultimate frog-boiling exercise. This is meant to be an open democracy, a vibrant political culture where we talk about things, and yet we've got these sneaky tax rises, and it's massively counterproductive.
Just to explain the boiling frog analogy.
I've had my 3 shreddies this morning, you can tell, right?
I like it. If you put a frog in boiling water, it will spot it instantly and it will leap out. If you put it in tepid water and you raise the heat slowly, it doesn't know and it dies. Apologies to any frogs who were offended by that analogy. But, Madeline, what struck me yesterday, and I'm interested that Liam mentioned this, was that Rachel Reeves just took that autumn statement to pieces yesterday, and he just handed it to her on a platter, and it was so easy for her to just put a line through it all and just say, you're talking nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, it's very easy for them to say that, but I've yet to hear what their plans are for the economy or how they would reduce the size of the state, which is if you want to cut taxes, it's going to have to entail some serious retrenchment.
Yeah.
They're very good at carping from the sidelines and not developing a real plan of their own, and that's not to excuse. I thought Liam made that point so brilliantly about the fact that we're not having public discussion and therefore democratic buy-in to these dramatic decisions. I also think that in general our system is just becoming, it's actually very worthy of Gordon Brown, I think, because it's a very complicated system. They give with one hand, take with another. There's never any discussion of how we might simplify the incredibly complex tax system that we have and therefore make it more transparent. But I think actually the complexity suits politicians because it means they can very easily give patronage to one particular group of voters if they want to court them.
How very cynical of you.
Listen, can I offer something rare, which is a bit of balance on this? Because I know that our viewers and listeners are struggling, and that's millions of people who are worried about how they're going to pay their rent, the cost at the supermarket, food inflation is a nightmare, and so on. Everything's going up.
Absolutely.
But we had a pandemic, 2.5, 3 years. We shut the economy down on and off for that period. We borrowed $500 billion. I wonder whether it's a miracle we're not in a worse state. First of all, we do not have high inflation anymore, so that's gone down to just over 4%. interest rates are steady, and we avoided recession, unlike the Eurozone and Germany. So I wonder whether the government might deserve credit that things aren't even worse.
Well, certainly, if we had had the opposition in charge, it would have taken us longer to get out of lockdown. They were fiercely resisting any...
Keir Starmer called Freedom Day reckless.
Well, exactly, and there was all that nonsense about this is the Boris variant and all this absolute gutter, distasteful... ghoulish politics that they were indulging in, which, you know, at the time, I think probably you had loads of people on GB News who were criticising that. Certainly in The Telegraph, we were very critical of that too. But, you know, as Boris said, you know, them's the breaks. Whoever is in charge will get blamed for the situation, however unfair that is. And people will take...
Is it not a story that Britain has not entered recession? Germany is. The Eurozone has been in recession. It was I think it was the IMF who predicted a year-long recession for this country.
And the Bank of England.
That's true. And the OBR seems to have been wrong about absolutely everything. I mean, the story seems to be that you can't trust the official forecasts. However, I don't think we can be complacent about the terrible state that we're in, because, you know, as we were talking about before the break, a lot of this growth is actually just having more people in the country. If we look at GDP...
Which is a bit like cooking the books, isn't it?
Well, exactly. I think so too. And either way, we should be looking at countries that have genuine growth year on year, and looking at what they do and how they achieve that.
Liam, let's look forward then to the next 6 months, because we know we're being played to some degree, don't we? We know there's going to be a lot of electioneering decisions made in the next six to possibly 12 months. Knowing what they did yesterday, how does that perhaps form a building block for what might come in the spring?
Well, I think Mads is right. It's easy for Labour to cart from the sidelines. The reason we haven't gone into recession, Mark, I think we've not gone into recession in the country despite the politicians. We've not gone into recession because this country is full of very dynamic, driven, entrepreneurial people who get up every day, go to work and make things happen. And that is the spark that Britain has had and, in my view, always will have. That's why we've not gone into recession. We've also not gone into recession because of some smoke and mirrors, because we're borrowing lots of money, the government is, and then spending it, and that counts as extra GDP, but it doesn't count as extra GDP per head or per capita. And Mads is right. A lot of the GDP rise is also driven by immigration. That's why standards of living are falling, even though there's growth. Looking forward, Bev, I do think there's going to be more talk of tax cuts, more headline-grabbing tax cuts, as the size of the state remorselessly increases, because they're not going to change those tax bands. They're going to keep going with this, what we call fiscal drag. They're going to keep drawing more and more people into taxation at higher rates. And that will mean there won't be a feel-good factor. And that's why I think the Tories will ultimately lose this election, because they're not generating a feel-good factor. As Reagan said, do you feel better off than this time 4 years ago? And people don't.
No, we don't. And you haven't made me feel any better, Liam. But it's always nice to see you.
I'd rather be gloomy than wrong.
Thank you, guys. Got to move on.
There you go, still to come. Problematic pupils. Teachers at an academy have gone on strike because of concerns over staff safety and well-being due to the behaviour of pupils.
Crikey. And Turkey troubles. 28% of Brits said they argue with family about cooking techniques at Christmas.
Get stuffed.
That and much more after your morning's news with Tamsin.
Thanks very much, Bev. Here are the headlines at 10:34. Net migration to the UK was up in 2022, although new figures show a downward trend to June this year. A record was hit in December with 745,000 arrivals. That's estimated to drop to just over 670,000 in the year to June. Most estimates suggest immigration is slowing, while the number of people leaving the UK is going up. Home Secretary James Cleverly said the new figure doesn't show a significant increase. The timing of the next general election had no impact on the decision to cut taxes, according to the Chancellor. Jeremy Hunt used the autumn statement yesterday to announce cuts to national insurance, saving someone earning £35,000 more than £450 a year. He said the economy has defied the odds and that a recession had been avoided. Despite those tax cuts, energy bills are expected to rise after the energy regulator announced a 5% increase to the price cap. From January, the average household will pay around £94 more over the course of a year. Ofgem says the increase is driven almost entirely by market instability and global events, including the war in Ukraine. The Foreign Secretary is visiting Israel amid uncertainty about when a pause in the war with Hamas will begin. The agreement for a 4-day ceasefire in Gaza appears to have been delayed. A senior Israeli official said it would not take effect before Friday, a day later than originally expected. Under the planned agreement, Hamas will release 50 Israeli hostages in exchange for 150 Palestinian prisoners. Lord Cameron says he wants to see the agreed pause in fighting.
Today is also a day where we hope to see this humanitarian pause. I think that's important because it's an opportunity to get hostages out and to get aid in, and I hope and would urge everyone who's involved in that agreement to make sure that it happens.
Well, those are the headlines. You can, of course, get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2557 and €1.1499. The price of gold is £1,588 and 42 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,467 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Still to come this morning, Jeremy Hunt has confirmed the government will honour its commitment to the triple lock by increasing the new state's pension by 8.5%. We're going to be talking a little bit about that. And also, I'm a Celebrity, and Nigel Farage.
Absolutely made a splash. I think he's getting his message across, but I'm curious what you think. We'll debate that surely. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It is 10:40. We cannot keep our pundits quiet. You are watching Britain's Newsroom with me, Mark Dolan, in for the brilliant Andrew Pearce, alongside the fabulous Bev Turner.
Now, of course, what day is it? Thursday. That means we're joined by political editor of Daily Express, Sam Lister, and broadcaster and journalist Carol Malone. Hence all the noise and all the chat. Right.
Yes, indeed. Now, Nigel Farage's time in the Australian jungle continues, and as ever, we're keeping a close eye on all the action.
That's right. Last night, it was influencer. Ooh, that's a proper job. Nella Rose stirring up trouble.
You're an influencer.
I am not an influencer.
I find you very influential.
Likewise. She was stirring up trouble amongst the campmates. Have a look at this.
Okay, so that since we're gonna get everything out in the open, let's get everything out in the open. Right. So sorry, all the tea is coming out now. So basically,
but this is what I was saying to you.
Apparently you're anti-immigrants. And
Who told you that?
Oh, the internet.
Oh, well, there we are. Then it must be true. It must be true.
It must be.
It must be true.
Okay, but then why don't black people like you?
You'd be amazed they do. You'd be amazed.
Nigel!
If you came with me, if you came with me, if you came with me through South London, you'd be astonished.
Oh, wow. What were you doing in South London, Nigel?
Well, I'm there every day.
You're in South. Wait, sorry. I'm so sorry to be shy. What are you doing? Sorry.
He's from South London.
I travel through South London.
So everyone hates you for no reason. Well, not that everyone hates you. That was so bad. But like, sorry,
you can disagree with somebody, but to chuck around accusations the way that they've been chucked around is grossly unfair. Anti-immigrant, right? No. All I've said is we cannot go on with the numbers coming to Britain that are coming. Do you know why?
I'm one of the numbers.
Oh, right. So that's it then. So should it be 5 million a year, 10 million?
Question,
no,
right?
you don't seem to understand.
Nigel, hang on.
Those immigrants that are coming in.
And hang on.
Had you have been in power a bit later?
So long about immigrants.
So frustrating to watch that, Carol Malone. She's not listening, she's not thinking, and Nigel's urging her to just think about what you're saying, don't make it personal.
I think if you were to ask that girl a single question about immigration, like how many people come to the country every year, why are you against it? She wouldn't be able to answer it. She has heard that Nigel is a racist, and that's the trope.
She read it on the internet.
She read it on the internet. My God, she's probably never read a newspaper in her life, or seen analysis, or watched a political programme in her entire life. And she's unravelling actually, because the night before she actually had a go at someone else for no proper reason. She had a go at a guy called Fred about her parents, and now she's attacking him because I suspect the telly want her to attack him. I suspect the I'm a Celebrity bosses wanted to have a go at him. After all, Nigel is in there. But what she doesn't realise, and there will be a backlash against her for this. She was the hot favourite to win originally. She won't win now because she's showing her colours. But what people who attack Nigel don't get it. When they call him a racist, they feed other people's like for him, if you know what I mean. So people who know he's not a racist, he's one of the most influential unelected politicians of our generation. History will talk about this guy as the guy who instigated Brexit, as the guy who just about brought down Coutts Bank. This is one guy who has never had a single vote in Parliament. So I think this will go against her because she clearly doesn't know what she's talking about immigration. And when he said to her, do you mean should 5 million come in? Should 10 million come in? She's not going to answer that because she doesn't know what any of that would mean.
But also when he said, he said, I think we should have fewer migrants. She's like, well, I am one of them. I think she's British born and bred, actually. I think she's a London-born girl. So even the definition is... This is the problem, though, isn't it, Sam? We fall over the words in this conversation. It's all about the language and quite rightly not being discriminatory against people who aren't born here. Quite right. But having this honest, open debate without it being personal and emotional, and that's a great example of how it always gets difficult.
This is the problem, because it is personal for people. You know, if you are from a family that is, you know, a migrant family, even if you are the kind of British-born next generation, I can see, well, that is personal, but this is not about personal, is it? The point Nigel Farage is making is the numbers of migrants coming into the country is huge, and we have to work out as a nation what we want to do about this. You know, there is an argument that actually you do get some growth off the back of it, but actually I know that the figures released this morning, the net migration figures, are huge, and Conservative MPs are absolutely furious about this. They're saying actually the net migration stripped out the number of people who have left the country, so actually it's more than 1 million people a year coming to the country, more than 1 million people a year. That is not sustainable in most Conservative MPs' minds.
Most definitely. I mean, you've got that eye-watering figure of 1.2 million people entering the country. I mean, yet the net figure is 670, but over 1 million people in a year. Does that destabilise society? What is the impact on our public services, all the rest of it? I thought that episode last night on I'm a Celebrity, Sam, reflected how irrational this debate around immigration is and how deluded many people are.
And it's very easy to throw the accusation of racism around, isn't it? And actually, it is incredibly damaging. No, you know, nobody wants to be accused of that. But as soon as you kind of go to that, it's over, isn't it? There is no rational...
And if you do get into the reality of it, you know, why can't people get a roof over their heads? Why is accommodation so expensive now? Rental, house prices, you know, we don't build enough houses. Why are the roads full of traffic? Why can't you get a school place for your kid? Well, the answer is the number of people coming into the country, and we need that honest debate.
Yes, but there is people don't want to have that debate, do they?
Carol, Sarah Vine was saying earlier that politically she can trace this back to Tony Blair, actually, and the way that he changed the conversation.
He opened the borders for Europe completely. He was warned that quite a lot of people would come in. His original estimate was a few hundred would come. Thousands came in the first year. So he opened the doors, and it's very hard to put the plug back in once you've done that. But going back to Nigel, when she said everyone hates you, I found this really interesting, that you know, you go in, he said, and I'm in East London every day and I'm talking to people. People don't take the time to understand his appeal. And the reason he is appealing to many people is because he understands that people feel that politicians aren't listening anymore to what they think or what they want. And he does, and he gets that, and he talks to them about that. And people like that girl, Nella, have no clue about that. You know, she doesn't care about politics. She probably ain't voting come the election. I bet she doesn't read anything. She doesn't care about the Tories, just that everyone hates the Tories. But for most people, for people who do vote, for people whose lives are affected by what happens in politics, they look at Nigel Farage and they think he's listening to what we say, and he gets that we're not being listened to. And that's why the people who are against him feed his appeal, because people realise that. They say, God, you know, he knows what we mean. He gets us. And I've been on the camp when he was campaigning for an MP seat. I was on the campaign trail with him, and they treat him like a rock god, and that's from every class. You know, he goes to the guy that's got the vest on and the fag in his mouth and the bottle of beer in his hand. The guy invites him in, and they're best mates within 10 minutes. He goes into an upper class household. The same thing. He's able to communicate with people, and yes, great leaders and great politicians, I call them a politician, isn't they're often very divisive. Look at Churchill, look at Thatcher, but the bottom line is they're able to take people with them, and that's what he
does. Now, here's the question for you, Carol. Does the country need a 5-year pause on immigration in order to regroup?
You know, the rest of Europe is doing this now. They're trying to pause. Germany has already said they're vetting people in a way they never did before. All the Schengen countries are doing exactly the same because it's out of control. You know, Germany took in 1 million people in a year and thought it was doing a really good thing. The bottom line, it's not. They're in a slump. They're about to go into a recession in Germany because of what's happened with immigration and money. So, yeah, there should be a pause.
A 5-year pause. What about that? And a referendum on it, perhaps? Sam?
A referendum. I think the country's fed up of referendums, to be perfectly honest.
No, I don't agree.
I think Nigel would win that one as well.
Well, I think he would, because in a way, as I said earlier, Brexit was the closest we ever came to the public, the British public, being asked our opinion on levels of migration.
No, that is true, and clearly, you know, from the Express's point of view, we were very happy with the verdict on that. But you know, I think that we don't want to resort to referendums all the time. The Conservative Party was elected and has been elected since 2010 on the basis it will reduce...
Briefly, your great paper is very pro-Brexit, and many of our viewers and listeners will feel that when they look at that figure of 670,000 in a year, Brexit has failed.
Yeah, and I think people are disappointed that, actually. And this is legal migration, don't forget. This is legal migration that is going up.
That we have control over.
Exactly. And they want action.
How are the government going to spin this story today in any sort of positive way?
Well, James Cleverly has been out. He's been responding, saying we do need to reduce the numbers, but it's not clear yet how he plans to do that.
Let's say what he said. So James Cleverly, Home Secretary, has said the migration figure is, quote, not showing a significant increase, but we are working across government on further measures to prevent exploitation and manipulation of our visa system. This isn't about manipulation of the visa system. These are people who are here quite legally.
Yeah, and I know that the Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, he feels very strongly about this, and he has put forward proposals to Number 10 to quickly and radically reduce the numbers. Now, it's up to Number 10 to then decide if they want to take those actions, which will no doubt be quite controversial because inevitably they, you know, that is the area we're in. But they have to do something.
He has to, Sam, doesn't he? Because you know he knows now. You know he's been talking about immigration, legal and otherwise, for so long. If he doesn't do this, even with if the next budget gives us all, you know, 10,000 quid each, he's still not going to win if he doesn't tackle immigration.
How does he put a positive spin on? Carol, you are the person that I know can always find something good to say about the Conservative Party, even on the days when me and your mate Tory boy can't think of anything and we're really trying. You can always find something good. What if you were advising Sunak this morning? How does he spin this positively?
What the immigration thing? Well, he's got to do what he's been saying. I will tackle immigration. He said I'm going to stop the boats. He's got to tackle legal immigration now, because we cannot have 1 million+ people coming into this country every year. It's you know, we're talking, you know, the boats you know, the people coming in on the boats, like 23,000 this year, is nothing compared to this.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
this is much more important.
Why can't there be, Sam Lister, a number? Why can't we agree as a country that 150, 200,000 a year, you know, we need the nurses, we need a few students, but just set a figure and that's the quota, like a nightclub, 1 in, 1 out.
Well, we did. I mean, we did as a country in 2010. David Cameron promised net migration in the tens of thousands, under 100,000, and every year since it has gone up. And the government, you know, the Conservatives have been voted in on that basis. They just now have to control the levers they have to make that happen.
Briefly, how will Labour handle this? Will the figures go up under Labour?
Almost inevitably. I mean, that is the
because
thing.
that's the point, Bev, isn't it? Those on the left actually don't really believe in borders, do they?
Absolutely, but actually what I was thinking then is with these numbers, so 1.2 million people came here, 508,000 people left. Maybe if Keir Starmer's Prime Minister, a lot more people will leave. Who knows?
Problem solved.
Where are we moving to? Australia? Australia looks nice, doesn't it? Right, still to come, it's been another shocking week in the COVID inquiry. Patrick Ballancer, Chris Whitty and Jonathan Van Tam have all been, well, giving a side of the pandemic. They would say it's their side. We would say there might be more than that. A couple of sides to each of their stories. We're going to be going through that next. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. It'll be another mild and cloudy day for many southern areas, but we will start to see a shift from the north as we get much colder air introduced. That's because this cold front is finally sinking southwards. It's been lingering across the north over the past few days, but behind it we've got significantly colder air. So across Scotland it will start to feel quite chilly through this afternoon. Already starting to see some snow showers falling over the hills. To the south though, quite a different story. Cloudy and fairly mild. Some sunshine here and there poking through, and temperatures similar to yesterday here, around 12 or 13 degrees, just above average for the time of year. But overnight is when we start to see that really chilly feel starting to become a bit more dominant. There'll be a bit of rain for a time across southern areas as that front does clear through, and quite a lot more cloud around overnight here for a time. But by morning, everywhere will be in that much colder air. There's still quite a lot of cloud around across the country and some really rather strong winds, particularly over the North Sea, across North Sea coast. That will keep us frost-free, but it will be a chillier start tomorrow. We'll continue to see those snow showers falling across the hills of Scotland, but by and large a fairly dry day for most areas, although you couldn't rule out a shower across the far west now and again. There'll still be a good amount of sunshine through Friday, and that will make for some clear skies overnight on Friday night. So a chilly feel in the afternoon, but on Saturday a hard frost for many.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with Newsroom.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with Newsroom.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Good morning, it's 11 o'clock on Thursday the 23rd of November. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Mark Dolan in for Andrew Pearce.
Yeah, loving having your company. Higher than we thought. Net migration to the UK in the year to December 2022 was higher than previously thought, hitting a new record of 745,000.
And a vote-winning statement. Jeremy Hunt announced the biggest tax cut since the 1980s. Are the Tories setting out their stall for a general election? The Chancellor spoke to Eamon and Ellie on breakfast.
I've no idea when the next election will be, but when it comes to elections, people do vote Conservative because they think that we are going to take the right decisions for the long term of the economy. They fundamentally trust.
Throats cut. That's the threat Jonathan Van Tam's family received during the pandemic. We'll discuss all of the big revelations of the COVID inquiry this week. And of course, really the big story in town is the latest figures for legal net migration. 672,000 in a year. That is a city the size of Liverpool in 12 months. Is that sustainable?
No, not if we're going to do that every year. It's just not sustainable. Let us know your thoughts this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com. But first of all, here's Tamsin Roberts with the very latest news.
Bev, thank you, and good morning from the GB Newsroom. It's 1 minute past 11. Net migration to the UK was up in 2022, although new figures show a downward trend to June this year. According to the Office for National Statistics, a record was hit in December with 745,000 arrivals. That's estimated to drop to just over 670,000 in the year to June. Most estimates suggest immigration is slowing, while the number of people leaving the UK is going up. Home Secretary James Cleverly said the new figure doesn't show a significant increase. The timing of the next election had no impact on the decision to cut taxes, according to the Chancellor. Jeremy Hunt used the autumn statement yesterday to announce cuts to national insurance, saying someone earning £35,000, for example, will have more than £450 a year in their pocket. He said the economy has defied the odds and that a recession had been avoided.
But the measures that I've taken today are what, more than 200 businesses wrote to me to ask for. The big business organisations like the CBI said it was the single most transformative thing that I could do. They're not particularly crowd pleasers. They're not the tax cuts that are on the tip of everyone's tongues, like an income tax cut or inheritance tax, but they are the things that will make the biggest difference to our long-term competitiveness.
But Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury, James Murray, says the public feels neglected.
You've had 13 years of low growth, you've had high taxes, you've had public services crumbling, and I think people know how they feel in this country at the moment under the cost of living crisis. If you ask families, do you and your family feel better off now than you were 13 years ago? I think right across Britain, the overwhelming answer will be no. And all of that is borne out by the statistics and the figures which were issued yesterday alongside the autumn statement, and the prospects for growth and change in the future are not there either.
Well, despite those tax cuts, energy bills are expected to rise after the energy regulator announced a 5% increase to the price cap. From January, the average household will pay around £94 more over the course of a year. Ofgem says the increase is driven almost entirely by market instability and global events, including the war in Ukraine. While Liberal Democrat spokesperson for the Treasury, Sarah Olney, said the Tories aren't doing enough.
And they're seeing, and again this morning we're hearing that the energy price cap is going up, so people can look forward, if I can put it like that, to higher energy bills again this winter. And what they see from the Tories is basically they're just completely out of touch. It feels like Rishi Sunak, Jeremy Hunt, they don't really understand what it's like on the ground for ordinary everyday people.
The Foreign Secretary is visiting Israel amid uncertainty about when a pause in the war with Hamas will begin. The agreement for a 4-day ceasefire in Gaza appears to have been delayed. A senior Israeli official said it would not take effect before Friday, a day later than originally expected. Under the planned agreement, Hamas will release 50 Israeli hostages in exchange for 150 Palestinian prisoners. David Cameron says he wants to see the agreed pause.
Today is also a day where we hope to see this humanitarian pause. I think that's important because it's an opportunity to get hostages out and to get aid in, and I hope and would urge everyone who's involved in that agreement to make sure that it happens.
A Eurosceptic politician whose anti-Islam comments have led to death threats could be on track to become the next Prime Minister of the Netherlands. Geert Wilders is leading talks to form a coalition government after his Freedom Party scored an upset last night. He promised to be a Prime Minister for everyone, but the result will send shockwaves across Europe. The right-wing populist has stoked tensions and generated headlines with promises to freeze immigration, slash payments to the EU and veto all new members to the bloc, including Ukraine. But despite his Euroscepticism, he'll have to work with pro-EU parties if he's to form government.
Politics for 25 years now, and this is the happiest day of my life so far in politics. We became the #1 party by far. I mean, it's what a lot of people, if you would have asked them a year ago, would call you mad, and it happened today. So I'm very proud. I'm very happy, and it brings along a lot of feeling of responsibility.
This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker. Just say play GB News. Now it's back to Bev and Mark.
Very good morning, it's 11:06. Look who's here today. Not Andrew Pearce, Mark Dolan is with us this morning. Andrew's
great.
got a day off.
There you go. I'm not a morning person, but it's great to have your company.
Neither am I. Still have the beer every day.
That's exactly right. I can smell the Pinot Grigio from here.
Now, emails you've been getting in touch. Jill has said the problem is people have stopped differentiating between legal and illegal immigration. It's illegal immigration that is the one that people are angry about. This is off the back of these record figures this morning. 670,000 people came here last year legally. Viv has said, is the Home Secretary on a different planet? He hated it. He stated, it's only gone up slightly, 606,000 and 672,000. We can't keep paying for everyone. Why bother to pay tax and council tax anymore?
And of course, the only politician serious about stopping the boats and tackling legal net migration is Suella Braverman, who's not even in the cabinet anymore. What does that tell you? Scott says, Mark, we're not short of workers. We have thousands of companies refusing to pay above the minimum wage. Question would be, would you be a care worker for the minimum wage? Foreigners do it because the remittance it pays is worth greater than it is remaining in the UK.
That's right. It's so difficult. I mean, my son's 20. Would he do the jobs that a lot of the immigrants come here and want to do? The cleaning, the security guard, the care home work? No, he wouldn't.
Well, no, and of course, a very big debate earlier in the week, which I know you covered, about a government minister saying that if you are disabled but able to work, you have a duty to do so. And I think we need a national conversation about what being a citizen involves. And yes, you've got to follow the law and pay your taxes, but perhaps put a shift in as well.
That's right. And it shouldn't be a punishment. Going to work and doing a job should not feel like a punishment. It should be something that gives you a sense of purpose in the morning, and you want to get out of bed, you want to go and talk to other people at work, and somehow, as you said, is it 5 million people of
working age, exactly, not active in the economy? I think that going to work is your national duty, and I think we need to certainly have that conversation going forward. Now, the estimated net migration stood at the UK at a provisional 672,000 up to June of this year.
So let's go live to our political editor, Christopher Hope. Good morning, Chris. I think you're probably in Westminster somewhere, gauging the reaction for you. There you are at Downing Street, gauging the reaction for us from the politicians. I've been asking all of our guests this morning, how do the Conservatives put some sort of positive spin on these numbers?
Well, they're trying to. So James Cleverly, who's the new Home Secretary, is telling us that they've expanded their health visa scheme to just an even cut for more social workers. They're proud of that. They recognise they're trying to provide humanitarian routes for people leaving Hong Kong, Ukraine and Afghanistan. But these figures, Bev, are a complete disaster for the Tory party. They've caused, internally, behind the scenes on WhatsApp groups, there is a civil war breaking out. At the moment, the new Conservative group of Tory MPs led by Miriam Cates and Danny Kruger. They've issued a statement saying this issue is do or die for the Conservative Party. They're saying high rates of migration, depressed wages, reduced investment in skills and technology, put unsustainable pressure on housing and public services, and threaten community cohesion. All of which many on the right would agree with. There's a problem here. Everyone knows about the issue with small boats. That's tens of thousands of people arriving across the water on the south coast of this country. That's almost a symptom of a bigger malaise that the government is allowing more than 1.2 million people to come here net. That's the net number, not those who have left. The ones who come here, taking off those who have left, coming here, settling in here, when we have all sorts of problems with public services being stressed and housing. And that's a choice that's made by the people behind me in Downing Street, a political choice, and that's part of the problem. That's what many MPs can't understand. The vote was to take back control of borders in 2016. Well, it appears that hasn't happened 7 years later.
Chopper, do you think that today's figure now, the latest figure that we have for legal net migration of 672,000 up to June of 2023 will have electoral implications?
It will do. I'm trying to find out for GBNews viewers what Suella Braverman thinks of this. Of course, the Home Secretary until a week last Monday. Now, she told me, for example, on my podcast I did for another news organisation in October 2022, that she wanted to get these figures down to tens of thousands. And if there's a figure at 672,000, it's a huge factor more than that. And it will be a problem. I think the only thing they've got going for them, the Tory party, is that Labour haven't got a better answer. Labour's answer is simply to increase and make better relations with enforcement bodies on the continent. But they're not doing anything, they're not doing more than the Tory party. The Tories are trying to make Rwanda work, break the model of these gangs who traffic people across the Channel. But again, that's not the story here. That's about the illegal migration arrivals. This is a legal number. And part of the problem is, Bev and Mark, that you've got a lot of people on benefits who aren't working. We've got a very tight labour economy. The Treasury, also behind me, number 11 Downing Street, they want people to come into the country to take these jobs and get the economy growing. So it's in quite a bind, I think. Politicians have sat for a while, not really getting more people off benefits into work. We saw it start last week with Jeremy Hunt and Mel Stride, but really they've got a lot more work to do. It's a long-term problem here and on the Tory watch this has happened.
OK, all right, thank you very much. Christopher Hope there at Downing Street. We're joined back in the studio by our Home and Security editor, Mark White, who's had a little bit more time to drill down into these figures. What do they tell us, Mark? And some people will just be turning on now this morning.
Well, that headline figure of 672,000, the net migration figure, which, of course, we would have thought would have been a new record, but it's not, because what the ONS figures also show, when I was standing a few months back on Clifftop in Dover, giving the figure of 606,000 net migration, it appears that was wrong, because they've revised that figure to 745,000, which is just enormous. But there we are. So 745,000. So what is that from 606? That's 130,000-ish or something like that?
Yeah.
Of a difference, which is just incredible. They have the way in which they are calculating their figures has now changed, and that, we're told, accounts for that disparity, but it is very significant.
It's pushing 1 million net migration in a year, isn't it, really? It's not far off that figure, and you have to wonder about the implications. I mean, something we talked about earlier is our infrastructure. You know, it could be that having skilled workers in the country, we've got care home staff, we've got nurses, all the rest of it, plus students. That's great news for the universities, but we just don't have the infrastructure to back it up. If we had more roads, more houses, more hospitals, we'd be okay, but of course we don't.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a city the size of Edinburgh coming and settling in the UK every year. And you're right, it is the infrastructure, the strain on that, because local authorities who also say that they don't have the budgets to provide more in the way of affordable housing, update their roads network provide the GP and healthcare provision and schools provision for these people, say they are buckling under the increase of people coming
Bev Turner, 670,000 people, right? Please let's not normalise these figures. It's eye-watering. Where are 672,000 people going to live this year?
Well, that is the size of the population of Cambridge. So imagine all of those houses in Cambridge. We need those to house all of these people. Simon Danchuk is also here with us, former Labour MP. It would be even worse, wouldn't it, under Labour? You just let everybody else in, Simon.
I don't think it would be any better under Labour. I think you're exactly right. And the truth of the matter is we've lost control of our borders. I think we've lost control of law and order. And I think we're losing control of our national identity. I think that's the reality of the situation. Well, that's happening because of poor political leadership. And what we are seeing is students coming here, far too many students coming into Britain, simply to create jobs for left-wing lecturers. That's the reality of it. Create well-paid jobs for left-wing lecturers in universities. Student dependents are allowed to come here. There's no reason for that at all. We're encouraging people to come here on work permits when really what we should be doing is getting the economically inactive back into work and doing these jobs. And we're also letting thousands upon thousands of illegal immigrants come into the country. What we're doing as well, the social consequences of all this is that we're importing hate speech, we're importing a machete culture from Africa, and we're importing a total disrespect for our military and police. These are the social consequences of these policies.
Why aren't more of your friends and colleagues on the left willing to say these things?
Well, I think they have a metropolitan Labour London view of the world. That's where Keir Starmer comes from. If you look at the figures, most of the asylum seekers, illegal immigrants that come into the country don't end up in North London. They're placed in Rochdale, they're placed in the North East, they're placed in Liverpool. They don't have to live with the consequences of our identity being broken down in this way. They have a very rose-tinted view of what the country's like because they're very much based in central London.
I mean, many on the left, they don't really believe in borders, do they?
No, that's
the likes of John McDonnell, he's made remarks in the past about how actually, you know, having sort of widespread immigration is a moral virtue.
Yes, absolutely. And the left and the far left still dominate the Parliamentary Labour Party, I'm afraid to say. So it won't get any better under a Labour government. The public are going to be in a real quandary.
This idea that we have one planet, this is what it is, isn't it? It's a one planet ethos. We have to share our resources with the world. That's what a lot of the younger generation definitely feel like that. Collectivism, the individual has disappeared from the conversation. Mark, just let us know a little bit more about those figures on students that Simon was talking about.
Well, what Simon said there was very interesting because in terms of student visas, 378,000 student visas were granted in the year to June, up from 320,000 in the previous year. Now, 96,000, according to the Office for National Statistics, 96,000 of those visas were to dependents. However, the Home Office, we mentioned before, put their own statistics out, and their figure actually shows even more in the way of visas that were handed out to dependents. 154,000 visas that were given to the dependents of students, and the vast majority of those students who are taking their dependents over are from two countries, Nigeria and India.
That was going to be my second question. Do we know? So we've got an influx of students from Nigeria and India who are bringing their family members with them. And there's no suggestion necessarily that they don't want to study and they don't want...
well, there is.
Well, OK.
People I've spoken to said that, you know, the student visa system is being scammed by those that want to get an easy route into the UK. They apply for a course that they might attend, they probably won't attend in any sort of dedicated and meaningful way.
Wow.
But it's a route in to get your family.
So is
you
that
come across and you take your family.
Is that what James Cleverly is hinting at then? Because he's made a statement this morning, hasn't he, saying we need to check that this system isn't being abused?
Yes, the Home Office has been concerned for some time that the system is being abused, and that's why they have announced a tightening of the way in which that student visa system operates to ensure that people just can't bring many of their dependents over. But that's not going to kick in until January of next year. So that's why it's obviously not figured in these figures. And then come our next set of figures, probably not really going to impact them either. On work visas, which is interesting also as well, 322,000 work visas were issued, up from 198,000 the year before. So that's gone up very significantly. And the main reason for that is because of the health visa scheme, that emergency scheme that was introduced to try to get more people into the NHS and social care. They are the vast majority of those that are coming over. Labour's Yvette Cooper, Shadow Home Secretary, has said that, look, this is just an absolute glaring example of the government's failure to recruit and train people here in the UK to take on those roles.
I'd like to think of something cheerful to say, fellas, but as usual, it's quite hard.
I'll give you one more that will cheer our viewers up.
Go on.
It won't, actually.
We've got 30 seconds.
The number of asylum seekers staying in hotels has risen again.
Oh, no.
It's gone up 10,000 from when Rishi Sunak said that he wanted to stop asylum seekers, the over-reliance on hotels, and get them into more purpose-built accommodation. Now at 56,000 asylum seekers being held or accommodated in hotels across the country.
If the political establishment don't get a handle on this, then not next year, but in 5 to 10 years' time, they're in for a shock.
Yeah, absolutely. Simon Danchuk, Mark White, thank you so much. Right up next, incompetent politicians, inconsistent science and family death threats. It's been a busy week in the COVID inquiry. Mark and I have quite strong opinions on this.
Indeed, you won't want to miss it. Sparks will fly. You're watching Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. It's 11:24. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Mark Dolan in for Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Lovely to have your company. It's been a busy week at the COVID inquiry with Professor Chris Whitty, Sir Patrick Vallance and Jonathan Van Tam giving evidence.
Let's take a look.
I was very aware that we essentially had two different things we were trying to balance. The risk of going too early, in which case you get all the damages from this with actually fairly minimal impact on the epidemic, and the risk of going too late, in which case you get all the problems of the pandemic running away. Now, as we will, I'm sure, come on to, my view is, with the benefit of hindsight, we went a bit too late on the first wave.
Well, we didn't see it before it was announced, and I think others in the Cabinet Office have also said they didn't see it before it was formulated as a policy, so we weren't involved in the run-up to it. So I think it would have been very obvious to anyone that this was likely to cause inevitably would cause an increase in transmission risk, and I think that would have been known by ministers. Well, I think I'm right in saying that the Prime Minister at the time gave up science when he was 15. And I think he'd be the first to admit it wasn't his forte, and that he did struggle with some of the concepts, and we did need to repeat them often.
Where I think, it finally got to me was the fact that I might have expected that if a crisis happened, this was, my responsibility to bear that kind of workload. I did not expect my family to be threatened with having their throats cut. I did not expect the police to have to say, will you move out in the middle of the night, in the middle of the evening, will you move out for a few days while we look at this and potentially make some arrests?
Jonathan Van Tam there. Tough. I'm sorry, if you're in public life and you're making decisions which are affecting people's lives and people's families and their livelihoods and the mental health of their teenagers, you are going to get some flack. Well, I'm sorry, and it's not relevant to the COVID inquiry.
Bev, I don't think we can be seen to, consider it acceptable that he's had death threats, his family have been threatened. The bottom line is that that's how it is for public figures these days. I think it's a really bad thing. My heart goes out to him and his family, but my heart doesn't go out to these revisionist scientists who are trying to gaslight all of us by suggesting that lockdowns were highly effective, that they saved lives. Look at us. We've got a destroyed economy. We've got a divided society, a generation of damaged kids. Nothing to show for it. I'm afraid there are other places. In America, Florida unlocked a year and a half before California. Comparable death rate from COVID. What bothers me about this inquiry is that I think it was the biggest Horlicks in history. I think they made a complete mess up of the whole thing. And yet this inquiry is there just to cover backsides and suggest that there's nothing to see here, we did all the right things.
Be still my beating heart, Mark Dolan. Because, of course, the thing is, what we need to understand is motivation behind these decisions. And it seems to be predicated on the idea that lockdowns are a good idea, and lockdowns, you better get used to it because we're going to have them in the future. The government says stay at home, you're going to be expected to. It's not even questioning the cost-benefit analysis of lockdowns, and all of the conclusions on each of these interview sessions seem to lead to, why didn't you lock down harder, earlier, sooner? Not whether you should have locked down at all. And motivation, I'm sorry, Mark.
Yeah. Yeah,
sorry.
motivation. Well, you have to wonder, don't you? I mean, the issue you've got is you've got a generation of politicians and scientists who are marking their own homework.
Yeah.
You know, where are the likes of Carl Hennigan, who called out the irregularities, the madness of these policies during the pandemic? Well, of course, he was demonised and cancelled like so many.
Yeah, and he actually gave evidence to the COVID inquiry and was treated with a completely different tone of interviewing than everybody else. Jonathan Van Tam yesterday, setting out his credentials, didn't say that he works for Moderna. Why is that not relevant? That's very relevant. Olivia Utley is our political correspondent at Westminster. She's going to give us the latest on the inquiry, perhaps with a little less emotion. Olivia, what's going on at the inquiry today?
Well, it's been a very difficult week, as you mentioned there, for Rishi Sunak in particular, actually. There's been a lot of criticism of the Eat Out to Help Out scheme. Patrick Vallance called it the Eat Out to Help Out the Virus scheme. All three scientists, Chris Whitty, Jonathan Van Tam and Patrick Vallance, all said that they weren't consulted. Now, of course, ministers argue that the reason that scientists are there is to advise them, and then ministers are allowed to, obviously make up their own minds. That said, the scientists say, how can they reach legitimate evidence-based decisions if the scientists weren't even asked in the first place? Today, we're hearing from the chief scientific advisor, Angela McLean. She called Rishi Sunak Dr. Death. She said something which I can't repeat on TV about Carl Hennigan, that lockdown skeptic scientist who Mark Dolan mentioned there. So all in all, it looks like it's set to be sort of more of the same from the COVID inquiry today, with the evidence from Angela McLean. Next week, we're expecting to hear from politicians. We're expecting to hear from Matt Hancock, Sajid Javid, Sadiq Khan. So we should be expecting something a little bit different next week, perhaps more about the economic considerations and less about the science. But this week is all about the science. We're hearing from all of the scientists, and they all have something pretty similar to say.
Funny that, a little bit like the last 2 years, 3 years, wasn't it? Thank you very much, Olivia. They all had similar things to say.
Well, indeed.
That's the issue, isn't it? We've got to trust the science. There's no such thing as the science.
And don't trust any policy that is not open to debate. If lockdowns are such a good idea, if vaccine mandates are such a good idea, then you would happily debate them. But of course, you couldn't debate them. You were chucked off Twitter, and often you'd lose your career for speaking out against them because you were a bad person. It is worth pointing out that the government and the authorities are clear that lockdowns, vaccine mandates saved many, many lives. That is, well, a strong view.
I mean, that's the official line.
That's the majority view, wouldn't you say, in science? Are we in the minority? I think we probably are.
I think if you ask people who believe those issues to show you their figures, they can't. And that's how I think we have to have this conversation, because it is not settled.
You and I feel gaslit about this. I think it's complete madness. Yesterday's autumn statement demonstrates the impact of an attempt to stop a respiratory virus, which is a broken economy. If that's not going to cost more lives, then I can't help you with that. If a waiting list of 7.6 million people on the NHS caused by lockdowns is not going to cost lives, I can't help you.
And £500 billion that was spent on the pandemic, which we're now trying to claw back, which is why we now have the inflation and we now have the high interest rates. Don't think these issues are not
apparently it's Brexit. Is it not? Isn't it Brexit?
It's nothing to do with Brexit.
Quick one, though, before the news, because Tamsin's waiting. She's not a patient person by nature. Will the truth ever out?
I think we just have to keep banging this drum, Mark, whenever we can. Those of us who saw it differently from the start, we need the opportunity to say in public that there have always been two sides to this story, because it's too important to ignore.
There you go. Still to come, backing British business. Jeremy Hunt unveiled what he called the country's biggest ever business tax cuts, but will it get Britain growing?
That and much, much more after the very impatient and wonderful Tamsin Roberts.
Patiently waiting. Thanks very much, Bev. Here are the headlines at 11:32. Net migration to the UK was up in 2022, although new figures show a downward trend to June this year. According to the Office for National Statistics, a record was hit in December with 745,000 arrivals. That's forecast to drop to just over 670,000 in the year to June. Most estimates suggest immigration is slowing, while the number of people leaving the UK is going up. The timing of the next election had no impact on the decision to cut taxes, according to the Chancellor. Jeremy Hunt used the autumn statement yesterday to announce cuts to national insurance, which will save someone earning £35,000 more than £450 a year. He said the economy has defied the odds and that a recession had been avoided. Well, despite those tax cuts, energy bills are expected to rise after the energy regulator announced a 5% increase to the price cap. From January, the average household will pay around £94 more over the course of a year. Ofgem says the increase is driven almost entirely by market instability and global events like the war in Ukraine. The Foreign Secretary is visiting Israel amid uncertainty about when a pause in the war with Hamas will begin. The agreement for a 4-day ceasefire in Gaza appears to have been delayed. A senior Israeli official said it would not take effect before Friday, a day later than originally expected. Under the planned agreement, Hamas will release 50 Israeli hostages in exchange for 150 Palestinian prisoners. Those are the headlines, and you can get more on all of those stories. Just visit our website, gbnews.com.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2547 and €1.1492. The price of gold is £1,589.60 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,460 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Coming up, has the Chancellor done enough to retain the red wall vote at the next election? Our presenter Pip Thompson is at a butcher's in Dudley to see what they think of the tax cuts.
This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Hope she brings you back a sausage.
Yeah, ribeye.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's
my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's coming up to 11:40. You're watching Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Mark Dolan, in for the brilliant Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So the full public reaction to the Chancellor's autumn statement is yet to be seen. But GB News presenter Pip Thompson is in the red wall town of Dudley to speak to locals to see if Jeremy Hunt has done enough to retain the Tory vote at the next election. Is it a little bit, is it stereotypical to do Dudley in that accent, Mark?
Yes, you've offended many people and you're about to be cancelled.
Pip, how is the reception down in Dudley this morning?
Bev, you are so predictable.
I know.
Are you all right today, both of you? Are you great? Listen, they're not too great here in Dudley Town Centre, really, when it comes to reacting to the Chancellor's autumn statement. I can't say they feel like they've had much of an early Christmas present. But let me just tell you about Dudley Town Centre, because it's one of the birthplaces of the Industrial Revolution, Dudley. It's famous for its castle, its zoo, it's got a priory, it's got a museum. It should be thriving, say locals here, but like many town centres, it really isn't. Now, this family butcher's has been going for over 30 years. This is Pete, who's worked in the family business all this time. Pete, do you mind if we just interrupt for a second? Sorry. What did you make, first of all, about what the Chancellor said? Is it a bit of a pre-election giveaway? Is he trying to get your vote?
I think it is, yes. Yeah, quite honestly, I do, yeah.
Was there anything in it for you?
A little bit, but whether it's enough, we'd like to see. Yeah.
What did you like then?
Well, there's a reduction in the national insurance contributions, but apart from that, that's not coming through till April. So.
You've been telling me about Dudley and how it's changed and how you've seen it alter. Now, it's a red wall seat. It was a big swing towards the Tories in 2019. Do you think it's going to go red again when the election happens next year, which could be May then?
Yeah, I think it'll be very, very close. I think it might swing back the other way, quite honestly. From what I gather from the customers, they won't change.
And what's Dudley like these days? How have you seen it? How have you seen it alter? I think you were telling me about how many butchers there used to be, and now you're one of the only ones.
We came here in 1990. We're fifth generation, and there was 11 butchers in the town when we came, and there's only 2 left now.
Really?
Yeah. So.
And the market, I've just been out there, it operates 6 days a week.
Yeah.
Is it as busy as it used to be?
No way. Nowhere near.
Okay.
No.
Well, Pete, thanks very much. I think one of the problems is there's so many roadworks that people actually have trouble getting into the town, and then they say there's nowhere to park either. But there is a metro station that's being revamped. There's a bus station, sorry, that's being revamped, and a metro station that is being built, so that might help. Right, guys, while I'm here, go on then, what's your order?
Oh, well, I know what... Go on, Mark, you know what you want, don't you?
Yeah, I'm a T-bone man. And that's not gossip.
T-bone, Pete. No, they haven't got it. I couldn't tell because I don't eat meat. This is not the best job for me today.
Oh, I can't believe we sent the vegetarian to the butchers in Dudley. Just get me some lovely high-quality sausages, Pip. That will be lovely for my weekend breakfast. Thank you so much. We've got Carol Malone and Sam Lister in the studio with us now here. Carol, just reflect a little bit on that. What Pip says there about the difficulty of getting into town centres and where you park your car, that that is stopping a lot of people shopping, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it probably is. I didn't think you were going to ask me about that. I haven't thought about it. Yeah, I mean, it is. You know, I put off going into central London because, one, I can't find a space. It makes me anxious. And two, when I find a space, I can't work the app. And three, when I see how much it costs, I nearly faint because it's something like 10 quid an hour in some parts of London. So, you know, that's spread out around the country. So, yeah, I think it stops people going into town.
Because, OK, you're northern, I'm northern, you're northern, Sam. We all remember growing up in towns where you could get in your car, you could drive to the city, you could park your car, and clearly you can't even do that outside of London anymore easily, Sam.
No, and I think Carol makes a good point actually about the apps.
Oh,
a lot of people find that off-putting, so even if you do find the space, you can't actually find a way to pay for it. But I think also we have to remember, you know, the rise of supermarkets has put the kibosh on markets, traditional markets, and Doncaster, where I'm from, it's a proper market town, but that market is sadly not what it used to be even 10 years ago. And this is what you have when you've got competition from places like Aldi and Tesco and what have you.
Do we just accept
you can always get a park as well.
Yeah.
Do we just have to accept that we're in a period of change here, aren't we? Maybe we all sound like Luddites saying we shouldn't move on and people just want to press a button and order their sausages to deliver on their doorstep.
And everyone's struggling financially, Carol, aren't they? And they will go for that cheapest piece of meat, that cheapest chicken, and that'll be in a supermarket.
That's what I was going to say there. I really try to shop locally where I live, but it's sometimes very difficult because I go, how much?
Yeah.
And I think, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
But I understand their cost too because they have to pay their rent, and, you know, in London, wherever you are, whether in the outskirts or in the middle, it's really expensive. So I feel, but I'm just not going to pay, you know, another third on top.
You're unusual in that you're quite buoyant about yesterday's autumn statement. So tell me why.
I mean, I know it's not, you know, we're not in clover, but, you know, remember last year at this time, the Bank of England said we were on the verge of a 2-year recession.
Correct.
You know, we had them saying that we had what's his name? Sunak said he was going to have to increase national insurance hugely, savagely. And here we are in a position where he's cutting 2p off it. It's going to mean someone on an average wage is going to save about 450 quid a year, which is not bad. You know, he's trying to bolster the economy and create growth, which I think is a really good thing. And I think it's the message of this. It's the signals this budget is putting out, which are really important. Because what he's saying is we're going back to the kind of Toryism, the Tories that cut taxes. That's what we're famous for. That's what we're going to do. And he's done that. And, you know, this has taken the election fight to Keir Starmer in a way it hasn't before, because Starmer has no policy on taxes. In fact, I don't know what his policy is on anything, and he could be in power within the next year. But I think what he's doing is he's spacing them out in a way that, so he's done the national insurance this time. I'm disappointed he didn't do inheritance tax. I'm disappointed he didn't do the tourist tax. But I think he's going to do income tax in March. And I think he's probably going to tackle those other things in March as well. So that, but I think the national psyche will be boosted slightly by this.
Yeah.
I mean, I read one line today from a lady, a mum, who said, "Oh, this means I can take my family on holiday this year." We forget that it takes a few hundred extra quid and a family can go on holiday.
Yeah.
So I think for that it's really important.
Well, let's combine our last two issues, which is how much money we've got and food, and talk about Christmas dinner, Sam. Because isn't there a story about the fact that how many people, a quarter of people, have a row with their families about how to cook Christmas dinner? I'm surprised it's not more than 25%.
Well, isn't it? I just thought it's one person in the family gets kind of de facto nominated and then you're stuck with it, aren't you? I mean, isn't everybody else just grateful they're not doing it? I can't understand why you'd have a row.
Do you cook your Christmas dinner?
Yeah. My grandma used to cook it. My mum, who's probably watching, tried cooking it for a couple of years, hated it, and I stepped into the breach. And I actually really love it. I find it quite relaxing doing all the prep and get all Christmassy, put on the music.
A little bit of a glass of wine on the go?
Exactly.
Keith Floyd style?
Exactly. You've got to be slightly tipsy when you do the Christmas dinner, otherwise it doesn't count. But, you know, everybody else should just be grateful. There shouldn't be any rowing about Christmas dinner.
This says 26% of people admit they struggle to juggle cooking with entertaining guests. What they mean is they're blotto by 10:30 in the morning. and so you can't be bothered. I mean, I've been that position where I think, I don't care about the dinner now, because I've had chocolate and champagne and I'm fine.
So the big thing with the Christmas dinner is, well, the veg is very important. The first thing is timing. So I learnt from Delia Smith. It's like, get your spuds parboiled in advance. advance. You know, get the turkey stuffed in advance, that kind of thing. So you've got to sort of schedule the day, and then you'll enjoy it. But vegetables, you're very passionate about that.
You see, some families like their vegetables al dente. I like mine cooked to mush.
Okay.
So I like my Brussels sprouts until they're almost fibrous liquid. I can't. If my sprout is hard, I can't eat it. If my carrot is hard,
see a doctor about that.
I can't eat it. And I know you're the same. You like a bit of a mush.
I like a
Careful, family show. Where's this going, folks? But the veggies, they're overlooked often, aren't they?
They're my favourite bit. You've got to have like a roast parsnip, otherwise it's not Christmas.
No. Oh, no, I can't be doing with mushy vegetables. Right, can we talk about people falling asleep at work, Sam?
Well, I was saying to Carol earlier, I think I may well fall asleep at work today. After yesterday's autumn statement, I'm pretty much on the verge of falling asleep.
But 20% of people are apparently asleep, want to fall asleep at work. Why?
My sympathies.
What are we doing wrong?
Well, it says actually that it is because people are penguin-style sleepers, anxious penguins. There's a category of sleepers, anxious penguins. I think I am one of these, where you wake up a lot in the night, so you never get that proper night's sleep, and then you feel very tired the next day. And it talks about how many people rely on sleeping tablets and all that kind of stuff. So actually, I mean, you know, you might think they're a bit lazy, but actually it's just people who can't sleep at night.
I have to say, out there, I've had to keep her awake. I've had to keep talking to her because she's on the verge of dropping off.
I remember being at primary school and we were put down for a nap mid-morning.
Do you know, I think it's very civilised.
It's very civilised. I think workplaces should have a little booth where you can go and have a lie down.
When I used to be in the office a lot, I used to put my head down at lunchtime. I used to just do that on the desk. And I do it at home every day. I have 40 minutes where I have a bit of a sandwich and I have a shut eye. And then I'm fine. I can go on till, you know, much later in the day.
But we're clearly not... We need to encourage better sleep habits, don't we? That's part of the problem. And I think, you know what, it's a lot of this before you go to bed. I bet you're really good with your sleep hygiene, aren't you?
I try. But yeah, we sort of think that it's a good thing not to sleep. You're very proud of how little sleep you've had. But I'm afraid, being serious for a second, things like dementia are linked to not getting enough sleep. So try and get your 8 hours is the headline.
Yeah, absolutely. Bullying teachers, Carol, what's going on? This is Teachers as an Academy.
I didn't think we were doing this. Hang on, OK. It's a story of teachers at a secondary school. It's called the Oasis Academy in the Isle of Sheppey in Kent. They've gone on strike. Now, the headline says, teachers walk out over homophobia, bullying and racism. But it's by the pupils. So they're the ones being bullied by the pupils and shouted out, whatever. And now, when I read this, I kept on thinking, well, surely this is a failing with teachers. You know, if you're being bullied by a kid, I'm not entirely sure you should be in charge of a classroom, frankly. And if you're allowing the children in your class to be homophobic, well, then you're not doing your job properly. You're not teaching them about what homophobia is and what it means. So, but they've all gone out on strike. And this is a school that Ofsted already had what was one of the worst ratings in the whole thing. So going on strike is not doing them any good, and certainly not doing the school any good, and it's not doing the kids any good. And they're put here, not ready, not respectful, not safe. So that's what they feel like in school with these kids.
So the teachers have actually gone outside with placards, Sam, and gone on strike with messages to the children about their behaviour.
I think this is absolutely ludicrous. The adults blaming children for their behaviour. The adults should be running a tight enough ship that the children are behaving.
But isn't that because society's values are imploding and the poor old teachers are having to sort of face it at the coalface?
They have to, you know, they are the adult, they are the person in control. They should be in control of that classroom.
Yeah, but they're not responsible for the kids that turn up every morning. I mean, I wonder whether it's families or wider society issue.
I don't think so, because you look at schools like Catherine Birbalsingh, she sets very, very high standards. She has kids from very deprived backgrounds. She doesn't take any nonsense about, you know, bad behaviour.
We had a story on here a couple of weeks ago about a school, teachers, you know, creating hell about the fact that the school governors had wanted to bring in a rule where if kids didn't bring a pen into class, they had to get detention. They thought this was archaic. This is the result of that kind of teaching and those kind of rules where, you know, you don't give kids any boundaries, you don't tell them what's right and wrong. This is what happens.
It's a lack of leadership as well in schools, isn't it? It's a terrible lack of leadership, and it's about schools not knowing, and I think teachers not knowing what punishments they can dish out. Is it sufficient just to give a detention? Well, if the child doesn't show up for detention, what do you do then? You get your parents in. The parents don't care. Then that child is a law unto themselves, unfortunately. It's a damning indictment.
I just wonder, though, what's happening in classrooms. I agree that higher standards would be good, but I think that society is in trouble. I really do. And I think young people are kind of becoming out of control. Their very full of themselves, they're spoiled rotten, and they think they're owed something. Well, I'm afraid they're not.
Not all young people, because next we've got Tom Harwood and Emily Carver, and they're not long out of
They're
school.
angels.
Good Afternoon Britain is going to be next. What have you got on the show, guys?
Thank you. Yes, we're not quite children,
Not anymore,
but
not
young
anymore.
people-ish.
I suppose it depends on your definition, doesn't it? I mean, I could have left school decades ago if it had been in previous generations, mightn't it? But no, we're going to be talking about one big story today. Some other bits and bobs, but the big story is, of course, migration. Not just the numbers for this year, but the numbers that have been revised for last year.
Yes, it's quite extraordinary. I think that is the big story. The ONS thought the number was much lower than it actually in fact was. 745,000 net migration last year, net migration now in the 600,000s. It is quite extraordinary. This is a Conservative government that was put in power, arguably, to get that number lower.
And indeed, that revised number for last year up by over 100,000. That, I think, is the deep story today. Do we know who's coming into this country? Can we count? And what on earth is the government doing with its numbers? Might this year's number be revised? We'll be digging into all of those stories and more coming up, of course, on the show on Good Afternoon Britain, a brand new show here on GB News. We'll be getting to that just after the weather.
Hello, welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. It'll be another mild and cloudy day for many southern areas, but we will start to see a shift from the north as we get much colder air introduced. That's because this cold front is finally sinking southwards. It's been lingering across the north over the past few days, but behind it we've got significantly colder air. So across Scotland it will start to feel quite chilly through this afternoon. Already starting to see some snow showers falling over the hills. To the south though, quite a different story. Cloudy and fairly mild. Some sunshine here and there poking through, and temperatures similar to yesterday here, around 12 or 13 degrees, just above average for the time of year. But overnight is when we start to see that really chilly feel starting to become a bit more dominant. There'll be a bit of rain for a time across southern areas as that front does clear through, and quite a lot more cloud around overnight here for a time. But by morning, everywhere will be in that much colder air. There's still quite a lot of cloud around across the country and some really rather strong winds, particularly over the North Sea, across North Sea coast. That will keep us frost-free, but it will be a chillier start tomorrow. We'll continue to see those snow showers falling across the hills of Scotland, but by and large a fairly dry day for most areas, although you couldn't rule out a shower across the far west now and again. There'll still be a good amount of sunshine through Friday, and that will make for some clear skies overnight on Friday night. So a chilly feel in the afternoon, but on Saturday a hard frost for many.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear